Are you prepared for the new world we are about to be living in? We are 35 days away from 2023 and 37 days away from Republicans taking the House majority. And things could get pretty ugly. And Congress isn't even the only change that we're facing. We're almost definitely going to see more attempts to ban women's rights to make decisions about our own bodies, more attacks on the LGBTQ plus community, and also some very nasty legislation. More Supreme Court decisions uprooting our democracy, and the advancement of an agenda based on panic over prosperity. But let's start with Congress. Just let me remind you of some of the bad faith buffoonery from far-right members who are about to wield more power now than ever before.
Democrats want Republicans dead, and they've already started the killings.
You're suggesting that these women at these abortion rallies are ugly and overweight?
Yes.
The Jihad Squad member from Minnesota has paid her husband, and not her brother husband, the other one, over $1 million in campaign funds.
Each of those members you just saw, they're going to sit on committees as part of the majority. They're going to have a bully pulpit in the House. They're going to be able to bring forward congressional subpoenas on any and everything. And they are already planning their moves.
We're going to investigate between 40 and 50 different things. There have been hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars wasted over the past 3 years. So that spans 2 administrations in the name of COVID.
I asked Whip Scalise if he would support investigating Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, and the Department of Justice in their handling and treatment of the pretrial January 6 defendants. He said he would support those investigations.
If Secretary Mayorkas does not resign, House Republicans will investigate every order, every action, and every failure. Will determine whether we can begin impeachment inquiry.
Look, congressional oversight is a vital check on the powers of the other branches, which is exactly why Republicans' eagerness to exploit it is an insult to the intricate system crafted by the very founders that they claim to revere. They want you angry, they want you scared and so exhausted that you won't realize that this pettiness and plunder is all they have. Whether we're talking about Congress, the Supreme Court, the culture wars that, in my opinion, are the playbook for the Republican Party apparatus and not a distraction, you have a responsibility as a member of this republic to be vigilant, to demand results and not just rhetoric, to show up and be present, to participate in the political arena. And I, as a part of the media apparatus, I have a responsibility too. I have a responsibility to tell you the truth, to ask the questions and not play both sides. News organizations also have this responsibility, and they also need to be vigilant about how they are covering this very fragile moment in our nation's ongoing story. Is the rhetoric no longer dangerous because it's presented as a piece of legislation? Can the extremists not be called into question because they are members of Congress? Is a lie still a lie even if a governor says it? Is it really racially charged, or is it just plain racism? We all have a role and a responsibility, y'all. Buckle up, get comfy, because we are in for a ride. Here to discuss this crazy ride we're about to get on is Ali Vitale, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent, Camila DeChalish, congressional reporter for The Washington Post, Juanita Tolliver, an MSNBC political analyst and host of the What a Day podcast, and Ashley Pratt Oates. She is an NBC Think contributor and former Republican. Welcome, ladies. I had to assemble an all-star lady panel to have this conversation, Allie. Okay, the streets had something to say. Look, Allie, you know, you are like one of the congressional gurus here for us. I think the only entity that is maybe not underestimating what is about to come from Congress is the White House. What do you know about what they are planning and how they're going to triangulate with this Republican House majority?
Yeah, you're right, I think, to prime viewers that they're in for a ride over the course of the next year and a half, because the Republican focal point is not necessarily policy-oriented right now, especially not in a period of divided government where it's unlikely that any of those bills that get pass in the Senate as well. But what's more likely is the focus that we're going to see on investigations and oversight. It's not a secret. No one's made any subtleties about this. The White House has known, though, all along that this was where it was going, especially knowing that this was likely a year that was going to be favorable to Republicans. Months before the midterm elections, they were staffing up in the White House counsel's office, adding lawyers, adding people who could do a lot of the opposition research and making sure that they had a rapid response team effectively in place for when these investigations actually started. But that's that's just what the White House is doing. They're taking seriously, especially the inquiries that are going to be made into things like Hunter Biden's laptop, as well as things like the Afghanistan withdrawal, where COVID-19 funding money went. All of those are key pieces of the oversight puzzle that we're about to see House Republicans mount on the Hill. But then there are also outside groups that are going to be doing a lot of that rapid response as well. And so really what we're going to be seeing is a lot of real-time fact-checking from Democrats and the White House, and Republicans trying to continue pushing into oversight and investigation.
So what about Trump? I mean, my least favorite topic, frankly. But how will his resistance to congressional subpoenas, which is something that he has a storied history, a track record of, how will that play into how Republicans are essentially moving in this upcoming Congress?
But not just Trump, right? Because if you look at the January 6th
Steve
committee,
Bannon, Mark
Bannon,
Meadows.
Navarro, Meadows, but also sitting Republican members who were subpoenaed by the January 6th committee who said, no, I'm not going to abide by a congressional subpoena. And part of the conversation that I was having with Republican lawmakers as they were doing those contempt referrals for people like Bannon and Meadows, the few Republicans that did vote to uphold those contempt referrals were doing so because they wanted their congressional subpoenas to also have teeth. This is a moment where actions have consequences. You can't just ignore a subpoena once and then when you're in the subpoenaing party say that they suddenly have teeth again. You have to abide by them all the time. So we're now going to see the shoe be on the other foot when people like Trump and others have said no to subpoenas from democratically led committees. Now we're going to see what happens when they're the ones who are issuing subpoenas, and Democrats could now have a leg to stand on to say, well, you've established the precedent that I don't have to do this, and we'll kind of see where it lands.
If I know my former colleagues, I know that they're probably going to comply with these subpoenas, which, you know, is another story
difficult, though,
for
too, right?
another day.
If you're looking at the Attorney General, who would then be in the position of potentially ignoring a subpoena, I mean, that gets you into some really murky territory, and that's where these investigations might lead us.
Camila, let me bring you in here because when I talked about the extremists who are members of Congress, I was talking about people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert. There are others, okay? These are folks that have never served in a Republican majority in Congress. What do we think is on their little nasty agenda?
Well, one thing that they said time and time again was that they really wanted, as Hunter Biden becoming a central focus, but also immigration and what Biden has done at the southern border. This is something that they've heavily criticized the Biden administration for, saying that they are not mitigating the flow of migrants trying to unlawfully enter the country. And so they've made it no secret that that's one of the biggest focuses that they want to really harp in on, and that is his immigration policies. And if they're really deterring migrants from coming to the border and really setting out policies to kind of detract people from coming.
And, you know, I mean, I think immigration is definitely a thread people should be watching, not just as we move into this next Congress, but all next year. Immigration policy is a real issue. Unfortunately, we have been having a disingenuous debate I think in politics about it. I want to move to Georgia because runoffs are coming up on December 6th. And after a legal battle threatened to prevent early voting on Saturday in Georgia, voters in 24 counties cast ballots in the Senate runoff. And again, that's between incumbent Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker. And according to the Secretary of State's office, y'all, more than 78,000 ballots were accepted yesterday. 78,000. To put that in perspective, that is almost double the margin of votes that separated the candidates in the general election. Ashley, these are amazing numbers. What should these signal for Republicans in the state, especially since they tried so hard to keep Saturday voting from going forward?
Yeah, I think this says a lot because the majority of the reporting that I was seeing, too, was that there were students that were home for Thanksgiving break who were very excited about the opportunity to vote in person. And it would be my guess that many of those students are leaning toward Warnock in this race. There were also reports, too, about the absentee ballots from the midterms being delayed or late. So I really think this early voting initiative is very, very important to democracy in Georgia. And that's why, you know, this lawsuit, I think, was won by the Warnock team. And that's why you're seeing such long lines at voting polls over a holiday weekend, which to me is extremely encouraging about the future of elections in our country, that so many young people were looking to turn out again over a holiday weekend. So to me, it's very encouraging that so many people showed up to vote this weekend.
I mean, your point about young people is very well taken. If we look specifically at Fulton County in Georgia, it's a Democratic stronghold, and 18 to 24-year-olds, we're putting it up on the screen for folks, they had the third highest turnout in the county, behind only 50 to 54-year-olds and then 55 to 60-year-old voters. Juanita, the young people are voting. And I would like to note that these are not new young people, right? Because you could not register any new voters between the general and the runoff. So what's this say to you?
It shows me that they know their power and they're ready to keep throwing their weight around. And you got to keep in mind that Georgia voters are probably tired, sick and tired of seeing these ads, seeing these campaign spots.
I'm tired of the ads.
For months, right? And so these young people are showing up and saying, look, we know we have a stake in this fight. We know our votes matter, and they're going to keep turning out. Once they get a taste of that power, once they get a taste of that ability to express their political will, they're not going to stop. And considering how young they are, they're going to be sticking around for years to come as Republicans continue to cap their appeal. They're never going to appeal to these young people with their policies. And so young people are turning up, and largely, we can assume, based on early voting numbers, supporting Democrats, just like they did in November.
Yeah, I mean, we have to wait to see the final numbers, but I think you are right. There's something there. Georgia is so important. I'm doing a deep dive on my Peacock show, so we'll have a Peacock special all about Georgia that is coming out this week, so people need to tune in to MSNBC on Peacock. I want to talk about the child tax credit. And I have been trying to talk about this for a very long time, but the news, y'all. But there's a recent New York Times piece, and it highlighted growing pressure to revive the expanded child tax credit. Now, for people that don't remember, through the child tax credit, it cut child poverty in the United States by nearly half. There were efforts to make it permanent. It died in the Senate. I think that this is a policy that proved to be useful to working families, but you got a lot of pushback from Republicans, Ashley, on this point. There's a recent report from the National Bureau of Economic Analysis, and it said that it had, quote, no effects on any labor supply measures. So people are still going to work. So what about this opposition from Republicans? Why?
Well, because they say they support families, but they in fact do not. And they don't care about children once they've been born. And they would love to have you think that they are the party of family, but they are not. And this proves exactly that, because there is no reason as to why something like this could not be put in place permanently for families. Kids are expensive. I've got a 5-month-old at home. So if you're a family that, you're relying upon 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet and you're still barely cutting it, something like this is going to help you tremendously. And when you looked at the reporting on this too, you definitely saw that this was helping families who just needed an extra leg up to feed their kids or to just make ends meet through their utility bills. But again, Republicans just are on the side of families, they say, but in reality, they aren't supportive of policies that do everything to help families.
Camila, we have to go, but one word to describe what you're watching for this week in Congress or across the country?
One thing I'm looking just to kind of see what Democrats are using as a strategy, what they really want to focus on now that Republicans are taking back control of the House. We know what Republicans want to focus on, but Democrats still behind the scenes are really trying to craft what their long-term strategy is to kind of take back control of the House in the years to come.
All right. NBC's Ali Vitale, Camila DeChalis, Juanita Tolliver, and Ashley Pratt Oates, my Sunday Lady Avengers. Thank you all very much.